So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and we make a return to MIRLOND today, a map which in the past I've actually had a little bit of an issue with because it's one of those that really should be quite varied in the way that it works out, and yet players often tend to rather stubbornly make it play out in exactly the same way each time. But I have faith that this time we will see something a little bit different. We certainly have a themed battle at the very least, so we have that going for us with several factions of evil men and goblins attacking MIRLOND, which is being held by the forces of good for the time being. We shall see though. It's a big settlement as well, so that's one of the reasons why it has a lot of potential to work out in many different ways, but hopefully we shall actually see that this time. It's quite an old replay this actually. It's been one that I've been sat on for quite a while, because when I got given it I had only just recently done a MIRLOND battle. And enough time has passed now, I think, where we can actually do it. And it was sent to me by Misty70, so big thank you to him. He's going to be playing as the semi-hidden faction of Dunland. So Dunland, of course, have got access to a few units from other factions, a couple of completely unique units to them as well. But for the most part, they are a forced horde faction. You can only go numbers heavy with Dunland because they don't have enough in terms of elites to actually go for a more quality-centric build. The half-orc spearguard here, with the armour upgrades, they have a little bit of support from the Isengard roster, unsurprisingly. Decent as far as spears go, but nothing special, but Dunland have very little that's actually special in their roster. They're not completely devoid of really good stuff, but we'll get to that in a moment. Half-orc Baneguard, of course, the shock infantry version, which will be useful for cracking through any armoured defenders they may perceive. Decently survivable as well. Of course, the Dunlanding veterans are very important to Dunland because they are really the dedicated line infantry for them, unlike with Isengard, who have got two other options that you will often see ahead of the Dunland veterans. Naturally, for the Dunland heartland, they are going to be much more important. Gwathlo trackers, the River Gwathlo, of course, running quite close to Dunland, so it makes sense that they're in this roster, but they are a very basic unit of archers. They can hide anywhere, but they're not rangers. They don't have that additional body-piercing damage that they can do, and they're quite lightly armoured, so they're easy to be skirmished down, but it's nice to have that archer presence nonetheless. Dunman Hunters, they've got a few units from Rhudaur, being that they have got a very similar style to them. Rhudaur perhaps a little bit hardier, considering their Dunedain ancestry, diluted though it may be, and the fact that the north is harsh, so it breeds sturdier folk. Dunland, however, is not exactly a paradise, so they're definitely hardy in their own way. Spears of Orthanc here, which are one of the two units that the Dunland have completely unique to them, and they're a very strong unit as well. They're a fantastic unit of heavily armoured crossbows that you can't really skirmish with because they've got everything going for them that a bodyguard unit normally has, all the trimmings, really high armour, very good in melee, multiple HP, all of that stuff. Very damaging as well. Genuinely very strong unit, but of course they're a bodyguard unit, so you can't have many of them. Trollshaw Axe Throwers for that damage at range, very nice for busting through phalanxes. The Blackwolds, outside of the bodyguard unit, is probably the best unit in melee that Dunland have because of that second hit point. Most of the other stuff is notably fragile. Got some Dunman Spearmen at the front, very, very basic. They've also got a couple of units of Riders of Orthanc, which are the mounted version, the other unique unit that Dunland have. And they're very good, honestly. They're a very good unit of cavalry. They're very good at dealing with other cavalry in particular, but of course at the end of the day they're still fantastic crossbows, so we shall see how they get used, and some Snaga as well, which interestingly enough are not actually the Isengard coloured Snaga, so they're presumably from elsewhere, the Misty Mountains perhaps, and some Dunman Outrunners, which are the lower tier of Rhudaur cavalry. You don't often see cavalry such as this, but with Dunland of course you've got less options anyway, so we shall see. Then we have Rhudaur, played by Smelly Ogre, so similar units here, albeit Rhudaur of course are much more well-rounded because they're a faction in their own right. Got some Witch Realm Enslavers, which are a terrific unit of bodyguard tier shock infantry with armour piercing. Rhudaur Swordsmen, Dunman Spearmen, lots of swordsmen. Numbers could be very important as they flood through the settlement here. More Dunman Spearmen, as they've already deployed in here. Some Crdolan Nobles way out in the distance in wedge formation. Again, more cavalry, which is kind of interesting. Interesting to see how that works. They've got a lot of hidden units as well, which I'd assume are stuff like Rangers and Blackwolds and Axe Throwers. All of that good stuff. Verogem Javelins maybe as well. Then we have Isengard, played by Carolus. He has got some Uruk-hai infantry, very useful in a situation like this because they're hardy, significantly stronger than something like the Rhudaur Swordsman. More expensive of course, but you can play the role of being slightly higher quality as Isengard quite well. Uruk-hai crossbows and pikes for helping to shore things up. We've got the Uruk-hai reavers, which are fragile but still damaging and numerous. more infantry. We saw in the very last battle, in the Golden Wood, that the Isengard Ballista can be used to pretty decent effect. We shall see if Carolus can do that as well. We've got the Guards of Arthedain, who have the same unit model as the crossbowmen, mounted and dismounted, that Dunland have over on the other side, albeit they're not quite as special actually in many ways, the Guards of Arthedain, because they're just spears, very tanky, but still just spears nonetheless. More Guard, of course, the Trolls of the White Hand, very nice trolls indeed, and then some Berserkers and Raiders just to round things off. Moving over here we have the Misty Mountains, who are in this very condensed blob played by Rhudaur. He's got some Mountain Uruk host, some Black Uruks, Drake Broodlings, lots of trolls, so he's going for a very high mass approach by the looks of things, quality centric by the looks of things, which is odd for the Misty Mountains, but we shall see how it goes. Another unit of cavalry in the Bulks champion, so it's going to be very difficult to sally out for the defenders if that's what they were hoping to do. And then some Blackback Berserkers hidden, more host, and more Black Uruks as well. And then the final attacking army is a second Rhudaur force played by Source. He has got some Witch Elm Enslavers, some Crdolan Pikes, glad to see them because they're always useful. Ettenmore's Troll Hunters and Crdolan Berserkers are also fantastic for doing that armour piercing damage at range. And then we've also got a couple of units of Rhudaur Swordsmen, more hidden units, which is to be expected. Rhudaur have plenty of units that can hide, marksmen, rangers, axe throwers, the works basically. Now moving on to the defenders, starting off with Arthedain played by Hidden. He has got some Arthedain Pikemen, some dismounted Knights of Annuminas. He has got some Annuminas Gate Guards and some Arthedain Pikemen, a catapult as well, possibly some units that are going to be hidden and interspersed throughout the map. Kind of difficult to tell because Arthedain with their Dunedain contingent certainly have the ability to hide quite a bit of their army. Then we have a Lindon, which is an interesting army to see on the field today. We have PA-ret.Finn, I'm just going to be calling him Finn. Lindon, he has got some Noldorin Guard, and that is his General's Bodyguard, which is quite interesting. Interesting place to put them considering it's a single HP unit. And the rest of his force, I mean, Lindon have got a few units that can hide as well, not quite as many, but there's trees on the outer edge of the map, so that muddies the waters somewhat. Got some 4 Lindon Pikemen, some Mithlond Pikemen. I mean, certainly if they can get their pikes into position, Lindon are in a very good place. Noldorin Blade Masters are absolutely fantastic, of course, and we've got some 4 Lindon Marines. The final army is played by Nabest, who's playing as Crdolan, who's got some Royal Court of House Thorondor. They're going to struggle to get anything done if they sally forth on their own, to be honest with you, purely because of the amount of mounted units that the attackers have brought. The rest of the Crdolan army is already within the settlements, and Minhiriath spears, lots of cheap pikes in the Greenway Garrison footmen, one of the real benefits to playing as Crdolan. Minhiriath men-at-arms, I mean, they'll do a job. They're decent enough at what they do. But the real threat that Crdolan poses, of course, in their crossbows, the sharpshooters, the gatekeepers. Tharbad Warhammers, of course, offer that armour piercing in melee. Hearthguard and Minhiriath archers can skirmish, and the Dunedain and the Wardens of Tir Gorthad here can help hold things down with quality and with that nice phalanx that the Wardens have. I'll make a cut because this is one of those maps where, based on the deployment zones and based on where everyone starts, there is often quite a bit of moving around to start with. But I'll rejoin as soon as the two sides are clashing. We may not have to wait too long for the two sides to clash, actually, as the Drake Broodlings charge in here, and I quite like this. I quite like that there's no grace period, potentially, because it shows that if you're sloppy with your deployment, this is what you can look forward to. And Hidden is not responding particularly well, I have to say, to the fact that his catapult is on the verge of collapse. And a charge from the mounted Knights of Annuminas, as long as you get your lances down, the Drake Broodlings will not respond too well to that. You can see some of them are actually bloodied up as a result of being impacted by the catapult crew. The catapult crew is actually running away and leaving their catapults behind. I'm not sure whether that is intentional from Hidden. He'll probably have to go back to remount that. The Grey Company also got a few volleys off, it's worth saying, but I like this. I like how aggressive the attackers are being here. They may be told to back off, which again would be, I think, a bit of a shame. I mean, they shouldn't back off because they're getting shot, so the Grey Company firing a couple of volleys of their body piercing. Of course, they're going to be one of the very few units in the game which maintains that trait moving into the next patch, whenever that may be, which is very significant. It'll give Arthedain and a couple of other factions who have got a unit like that. I think Harad are the only ones I can think of off the top of my head, but it gives them a potentially still devastating tool. The Trolls here, as well as the Bulks champions. I mean, the Bulks champions, you can see the Royal Court of House Thorondor moving in. I mean, the Misty Mountains should really not be too concerned, to be honest, about the Royal Court of House of the Rhudaur. I mean, they should here, because I do like how Nabest targeted down the cave trolls in particular, because when the cavalry's got its charge bonus going on, you will skewer a few of them, but you do need to get away from the trolls pretty quickly. More worryingly, you need to get away from the Bolgs champions, because the Royal Court of House of the Rhudaur will not stand a chance against the Bolgs champions in melee. It's exactly the sort of target they're going to be useful against. But a nice hit and run there. A couple of the riders fell, but they did manage to kill off. There's some dead Drake broodlings there. There's also a couple of dead trolls. And dealing with those cave trolls could prove to be very, very important. Meanwhile, those Rhudaur marksmen and axemen, I should say. Any marksmen in there, or am I just seeing things? No, it's just Rhudaur axemen. Arthedain ripping some shots into the axemen. You can see there the Wardens of the North. A little bit cut off. Again, I think Hidden, he really needs to start getting his ducks in a row here, because he's in real danger of sort of sloppy, lackluster play costing him some of his really important units. Has he still got his catapult? Did he leave it behind? No, he did go back and get that at least. I was going to say, just leaving the artillery piece outside the walls would again be gross negligence almost. Rhudaur are moving forward. Arthedain Rangers as well. Again, he's got his army set up here, but he's being a bit slow. And Lindon as well. I mean, Lindon, they need to be especially cautious around stuff like the Arthedain Rangers, because if it rips through their pike line, they will get deleted from existence, which is not great for them. Rhudaur trying to sort of shuffle around. I mean, they've got a golden opportunity here. It may be that they've been told to back off and allow the defenders into position. Again, considering the fact that the defenders have utilised their cavalry to attack the Misty Mountains, I would say all bets are off. I would say you can't have it both ways, and you should go after them, and this unit of Rhudaur Axemen could go after this unit of Wardens of the North, cut them off, and that would be a huge unit for Arthedain to lose in terms of the individual quality of them, but in particular those AP arrows, which can be so useful at getting rid of higher end units. But I think they were told to let them pass, which again I think is a shame. And you can see over here, what is going on over here? That is the sign of elven arrows opening up. Or is it? Very bemusing, this. I don't think either side really knows what they're doing, how they want to proceed. Ones of the North shuffling backwards. The Blackwards could have gone in. I mean, the Blackwards would have been even better, but you can see again a volley coming in from the Elven Archers, which once again has cost Rhudaur a few more of their axemen. Which again would be the sign if I were the attackers. I'm not stepping back. Your own negligence has put you in this position. I'm going to punish you for it. That would be my view of the situation, but you may often get players throw their toys out of the pram and quit the game if you do that, so I can kind of understand maybe why Rhudaur has backed off in the end as they move backwards. But we shall see. I think I will actually make another small cut here, because it's quite likely that the attackers have been told to sort of back off, and the defenders will undoubtedly take their time getting into position. So we may be getting underway again as the Isengard here are starting to open up on some of the attackers as they move forward. The trolls are moving forward on their own, which I'm not crazy about that idea. It is worth saying as well that, as I somewhat feared, we have seemed to have settled into how MIRLOND is usually played, and that's why I'm not crazy about this map, to be honest with you. Creatures of habit tend to congregate on it, and the early game could and should perhaps have been a little bit more high stakes if the defenders were willing to test themselves a little bit more against a rapid advance from the attackers, but clearly they pulled rank and told them to back off, which I find to be quite disappointing on the defenders' part. But we shall see how this battle progresses now as the Grey Company rip more shots into the advancing Misty Mountains army. I mean, Rhudaur has definitely not been backwards about coming forwards. I like how aggressive he has been, and he is moving forward with his snow trolls over here, and to be fair, the Harland infantry will do decently against the snow trolls. The pikes will struggle though, especially with cave trolls moving in. This is a lot of trolls, and the lighter units here from Lindon are going to struggle. Those 4 Lindon pikes simply do not have the survivability when their formation gets broken to deal with trolls like this. And especially not when they're coming forward as well with some infantry and support. The Mountaineer at Coast are decent as well. They don't have the melee defense of the Harland and infantry, but to make up for that they have that armour. Imported from Dol Guldur as it may be, they have managed to shore things up with an extra unit of Harland and infantry. The Knights of Innuminus are on the way down here. I mean, yeah, the Lindon pikes break, and that's completely unsurprising. I really like the way that the Misty Mountains, excuse me, at least I didn't belch on camera, that would have been extremely embarrassing. But I like how aggressive the Misty Mountains are being here. They can see that the front line is not going to be sufficient if they move forward aggressively and with force and with higher tier units that are more costly, like trolls. Because that was not enough. That was not a sufficient enough front line to stop a full assault. And the Knights of Innuminus, it wasn't a bad idea from Hidden to maybe try and get a cheeky charge, but there were too many Lindon units in the way, really, so it made it a little bit more difficult. There are some Mithlond Swordmasters coming down here, but again, a singular unit is not going to be enough. Like, the elves are strong, like, individually, very, very good, but you're not going to be able to stop a whole force of heavy orcs, cave trolls, and spears with a single unit of Swordmasters, elven or no. Meanwhile, Beastie over here is going to try and shoot up. It's a pretty difficult angle, but they're actually not doing too badly. I mean, they're cresting their shots quite nicely, at least some of their number are. Kind of difficult though. I mean, they're a cheap enough archer to the point where even though they're not going to do much damage, you may as well try and shoot into this Crdolan front line and do what damage you can, because the Dunland hunters are unlikely to do much in the way of damage to targets archers normally go after. Gwatlow trackers actually do have slightly more missile damage, I think by a value of 1. I think the Dunland hunters have got missile attack of 3, the Gwatlow trackers have got 1 of 4, I believe that's how it is. Getting some hits, which is nice. Soften up Crdolan for an attack by the very numerous Dunlendings. But, for the time being, it's going to be over here. The Elven Archers, the Harland and Guard firing away. And you can see the Rhudaur clansmen are here. They've got the armour upgrade as well, so the Rhudaur play here, Source, will not mind one bit that the Elves are electing to use their ammunition on probably the best unit from Rhudaur's perspective they could be using it on. Ooh. And now the Isengard Ballista is also in place. The attackers are approaching this in a very good way so far, and the defenders need to rethink their strategy, I think, because it's not going too well for them so far. Arthedain Marksman, Evendim Spearmen, but more worryingly, a few of those very valuable Knights of Innuminus. Frame rate dipping a little bit there. I mean, he could also get a really devastating hit on those Mithlond Swordmasters if they get fortunate with the Ballista. I think just the Ballista letting them know that it's there. You don't want to use up all of your ammunition on these kinds of units from an Isengard perspective, but you've done a little bit of damage, and the defenders will now be certainly worried, I think, about the fact that the Isengard Ballista is there providing overwatch, because if they do set up a beefy defence over here, the Ballista will simply start firing again. So again, I like this from the attackers so far. Meanwhile, you can see over here crossbows are using their ammo, which I find somewhat surprising. Are they using it on possibly the veterans? I think that was a blank shot actually, so they cancelled it, which is probably for the best. But crossbows and archers up here on the high ground, ready to shoot. I mean, they're in a good place to capitalise on Dunland when they eventually start moving forwards, which will have to happen sooner or later. The onus is on the attackers after all to move forward and do the business. Minotaur Roman gatekeepers utilising their ammunition early as well. And again, this is exactly what you want to see if you're the attackers as well. If you can draw something like the gatekeepers into skirmishing with something as low value as the Gwatlow trackers as the attackers, that's a victory for you. You won't win that skirmish fight, of course you won't. The Minotaur Roman gatekeepers are much more heavily armoured, do much more damage per shot. Doesn't matter though. You're taking away one of the most damaging tools that the defenders have for the late game. It's exactly the sort of thing you want to be seeing. So Dunland doing their job here, and they're doing a good job at skirmishing here, I have to say, the attackers. They were aggressive to deal with that first defensive line, and now they've slowed it right down. And they're picking away at the defenders. Again, they need to be a little bit careful with overuse of that ballista, I think, but again, scoring some hits, doing some damage to the Evendim Spearmen and the Harland and Guard, which are on the front line over here. Harland and Guard more well suited to a skirmish fight than the other Lindon archers, the 4 Lindon, because of that shield that they do have. But what are they actually firing at? I mean, if it is the Rhudaur marksman, again, they'll win that skirmish fight, but again, the attackers will count that as a victory. The attackers were never going to win a quality skirmish fight, and that may be down to the positioning that the attackers have elected to take up here. Like, this is what everyone does on MIRLOND. They defend these 2 points because they're narrow chokes that you can put a lot of infantry in, but The attackers are exploiting that here because, as good as it is for infantry, it's exposed if you allow yourself to be skirmished with. And they're not responding well to the skirmish that the attackers are bringing their way so far. I mean, they're not getting rolled over by any means, but these little victories will add up, and eventually the attackers may find themselves with much more left in the tank than the defenders come the late game. And here you can see Dunland actually feeling as though they can test the waters with an attack on the infantry line already. Now obviously Dunman Hunters are not going to get very far against a prepared Crdolan front line made up of swordsmen and spearmen. But, I mean, there's also some cheap pikes coming down here, so yeah, Crdolan will be quite happy on this front line for the time being, but Dunland getting the show on the road in this choke point as well. Probably in it for the long haul over here, and it looks as though, again, another good move from the attackers is the fact they're simultaneously attacking through both roads at the same time, which again, I like. You can see there the Rhudaur Axemen. They will have the beating of the Evendim Spearmen in melee because of their armour piercing. However, the support coming in from the archers in behind, Hearthguard, I think there's some Arthedain marchmen in there as well. Rhudaur Axemen naturally are not going to do too well under arrow fire. Their armour's not brilliant. No shields. Arthedain pikemen moving in to try and shore things up. That will be more of an issue for the Rhudaur Axemen, but more are coming forward, and of course the attackers, they don't need to worry too much about taking losses. They've got plenty left in the tank. Again, 4 really of the armies are traditionally more numbers centric, although to be fair, the Misty Mountains have invested more in their quality, their smaller units, which is odd. But Dunland, very much numbers centric. The 2 Rhudaur armies, more about numbers. Isengard are a good mix. So they've got disposable units. You can see they're trying to push through here, right up against the cliffside. The Dunlanding veterans are squeezing their way through. A few of them making their way in, but they will have that door slammed shut in their face by Dunedain captains and Tharbad warhammers. So not great for them. Instantly getting run through with Dunedain longswords. But this is a large amount of Dunland forces, and there's more where that came from Mr. Beastie. His cavalry is still waiting outside the settlement. They could, of course, go around the side of the map and link up with their allies on the other side, or they could just wait for their time. There is actually a way that I've learned just by seeing the campaign in DAC. There is an interesting way I think you could apply cavalry in a situation like this, which perhaps would not be quite what you expect, but more on that another time, I think, because I don't think we're going to see it here anyway. Uruk-hai infantry moving in to add a little bit more steel, both mentally and physically, to the front line. Certainly higher quality than the Dunlanders they'll be fighting alongside, but I like this. You can see they've also got more Gwathlo trackers shooting into the side. Rather sporadic hits they will be scoring, but still, this will add up over time, and Crdolan are really dumping an awful lot of effort into keeping this front line held down. The Uruk-hai infantry going to be closing in as well, trying to surround things, or at least make the engagement a better shape for the attackers. You can see here the Rhudaur clansmen, yeah, the Rhudaur Axemen got turned back pretty quickly, so good use of the archers here from the defenders. Harlengard out of ammunition now, presumably shoring up the Evendim Spearmen on the defence. Rhudaur clansmen with the armour upgrade, not quite such a juicy target for the archers, with the added chainmail and big shields that the spearmen have in comparison to the axemen that were here previously, and the Mountain Uruk coast even more so. Again, that Dol Guldur plate is, I mean, it's very good for Orc standards. They will be able to get in there, and that will mean that this front line will collapse slowly but surely over time without reinforcements. Be interesting to see what the defenders do. They've got some Arthedain men-at-arms with the upgrades here, which would certainly slow things down. Trolls of the White Hand are over here as well, so all of the trolls really have been committed to this side of the battlefield, which I like, because I think the trolls, while the heavy swordsmen of Lindon are a problem, the sheer amount of high quality pikes that Lindon have, trolls are a good answer to that if they're committed at the right time. And I can see over here Uruk-hai infantry struggling, but they have managed to surround this little corner of the Crdolan front line, so they will be able to get some value. Too much of the Dunland front line, however, is made up of trash basically, but that's true of Dunland no matter what they do. But some black walls on the front line will make a big difference. They'll be pretty good against the forces of Crdolan that they're facing off against. Minhiriath units in particular are going to struggle against those big granite axes that the black walls have, because they do look like axes that are actually made of stone, the black walls have. Can't believe people disrespect you by phoning you up right in the middle of when you're doing something. Anyway, regardless of that potential cut there, you can see here that the Blackwolds, like, it does look like their axes are made of stone, which I find to be quite interesting. Suits their savage nature a little bit more. And yeah, the Crdolan front line, that bloody phone call completely took me off my stride. This is a real problem for Dunland, however, and this is where you can be punished as Dunland if you get a little bit too stingy on committing the stuff to your front line. Your low quality means that this is the sort of thing that can happen to you, especially when you're facing off against a faction which can hold the line as nicely as Crdolan can with all of their pikes. So it is a potential problem here. Now they've only got a single unit of Blackwolds on the front line, and they may have to fall back on just skirmishing, trying to poke and prod at them. They will need support from the other factions as well. I like the fact that Isengard sent forward a unit of Uruk-hai infantry to help them. They may need a little bit more as well, Dunland. Dunland can't be asked, I think, or can't be expected to push through Crdolan's very thick front line here, all on their lonesome. And that could be a trap that the attackers fall into. If all of them want the glory of fighting in this choke point over here, where they're still doing quite well, it could end up costing them quite dearly in the late game if Crdolan continue to perform as well against Dunland as they have done up until this point in that choke point over there. Mountain Uruk host and Rhudaur clansmen, however, are going to be fighting hard on the front line. Evendim spearmen, more Evendim spearmen being committed. Evendim spearmen, like I say, they are a little bit misleading because they look like they should be the equal of something like a man-at-arms unit or just a standard unit on the front line, but they aren't. They are a militia unit, which I will keep saying, you know, and that's one of the reasons why I think the full plate version of them should probably be removed, to be honest with you, because it is quite misleading, but no matter. There is yet more Mountain Uruk host arriving on the scene as well. A few Rhudaur marksmen left alive, which of course if you leave a few of them left alive, this means that the amount of ammunition they have, they'll be able to shoot fairly continuously. The damage they do will be highly negligible, but still a little bit of support coming in will always be quite useful. Reinforcements in behind, so they still have those Arthedain men-at-arms which can be committed. There's still some Arthedain marksmen as well, I think, shooting across the way, trying to go after the Snaga skirmishers. So more units arriving on the front. What have we got here? Some Reavers from Isengard, some returning, or a new unit of veterans, I should say. And of course the Snaga skirmishers from Dunland as well, so that javelin support will be a big deal. Arrow fire coming from on high. From what, I wonder? Dunland captain still on the front line. I mean, the shape of this engagement now is not great for Crdolan. You'd have think they'd have learnt the lesson with the Uruk-hai infantry doing this before, but now a unit of Uruk-hai Reavers is doing exactly the same thing. They're going to try and shoot them down, which to be fair won't take too long. And here we have spears, Snaga skirmishers. A very depleted unit of Minhiriath men-at-arms over here. Only 60 men left, but the Reavers are falling very, very quickly. Getting some kills on these armoured Crdolan infantrymen, but the arrows outpacing the damage they can do with their axes. Don't know if Crdolan can continue to hold on from the front as well as they have done up till now. That, I believe, is the whistle of a crossbow, and it is Manatar Romen gatekeepers firing into the back ranks over here, and once again we're starting to see the attacking forces start to waver. But again, it's all just a matter of trying to wear them down. Javelins being used, and they've got a pretty good angle as well. They'll be able to pick up a few kills there, the Snaga. And they are going to get some reinforcements, which is good. Isengard moving across. Also Rhudaur with a couple of units of low tier spears. I mean, these units are quite basic, but it will still be very helpful for Dunland to see this kind of force on the way. They are exposing themselves a little bit to arrow fire from the cliffside, but they won't mind too much about that. They'd much prefer, I think, to see the Arthedain marksmen use their ammunition up on stuff like Dunman spearmen and Uruk-hai raiders than have it saved for later when they're committing forward stuff like Blackwolds and Uruk-hai berserkers. Meanwhile, the Isengard ballista did get a few shots in. Not a devastating amount of burning corpses on the floor, but still more damage done. The Arthedain men-at-arms were committed, as well as a unit of Arthedain pikemen. And of course more Rhudaur units are also arriving, more axemen, some swordsmen as well with those hexagonal shields. And once again it's just going to be a case of the tortoise approach rather than the hare approach here for the attackers. They were denied the hare approach when the defenders clearly told them to back off in the early game. But Mountaineer at Coast starting to lose their numbers a little bit on the front line, but with more axemen arriving, that should be pretty good. Offer a little bit of a damage spike here for Arthedain, but you can also see the Dunedain Rangers rather worryingly are getting into position. They do re-hide themselves. For the time being it's just the Hearthguard who are firing, who do a relatively basic amount of damage really. Their main selling point is how incredibly tanky they are. The Rangers are going to start firing as well. Always a worrying sight to behold, but they're firing right up into the air, which will please the attackers greatly if they can notice that. If you're firing up into the air, you're not going to be shooting through a unit, you're going to be shooting down on top of them, which means the body piercing is ultimately not doing all that much. Meanwhile, raiders arriving on the front line, damage certainly. More units pushing in. Again, just Dunland spearmen just continuing to push forward with low quality trash. The Skaven approach to warfare. Uruk-hai infantry also waiting a little bit more like it in terms of quality. The Snaga skirmishers I think are out of ammo now. They're not going to offer much in melee, but still, it's over 100 Snaga, which can be committed to the melee fight and continue to put pressure on Crdolan here. We have a look here from the front and you can see it's a pretty confusing mess. Minhiriath men-at-arms with Wardens of Tyr and Gorthad making up the bulk of the defence, a few cheap pikes around there as well. Out of ammunition now, the Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers, which again, if they may regret skirmishing with the Guathlo trackers later on, if that proves to be a problem. But they are still very fine halberdiers in melee, with those billhooks of theirs, or vulges, depending on the exact definition. But will that be sufficient? Again, armour piercing is not necessarily the most important thing here. I mean, against the upper end Isengard units, yes. But other than that, like Dunland, Rhudaur, not really all that focused on armour, so the pikes will find themselves being much more. Again, look, Isengard squeezing around this flank. Crdolan not closing this door resolutely enough. It's only raiders which are already shaken, but still able to take advantage of this little gap which has been forming. The rest of the line, however, to be fair to Crdolan, is holding on quite nicely. Let's have a little look at what's going on back over here. Some troll hunters. Yeah, you can see the Arthedain line. I mean, it says victory seems certain, but I think a lot of that is to do with the range support they're getting. Granadine Rangers are now firing as well. And what are they firing at, I wonder? They're going to be shooting into Arthedain Marksman and Hearthguard. The body piercing will be somewhat useful there. Maybe not as useful as it could be. This, however, is very worrying. The Dunedain Rangers weren't in the ideal position. These Wardens of Elos Tyrian, however, are. And that's probably why Rhudaur is still struggling to get through an admittedly flagging Arthedain front line. With Black Waltz on the front line especially, they should be able to get through there without too many issues. There are Dunedain Troll Slayers moving in, so the defenders now really flexing their muscles a little bit with regards to their ranged units, which especially, I mean, they've got all their bases covered really. Lindon and Arthedain both have good javelins, they both have very fine archers as well. Crdolan, of course, bring their crossbows to the table, so it's a pretty decent little force. So now should be a time where the attackers do take some significant losses. These pikes are, of course, pointing not entirely in the right direction. Some trolls moving forward. What's left of the snow trolls just being committed forward, hoping to try and push through this Arthedain front line quickly. Mountaineer at Coast also charging forwards. These Arthedain men-at-arms not getting into position quite quickly enough to prevent these units from surging through a gap. They can try and set up another front line here, I think, but they will be pushed back a little bit. Dunedain Troll Slayers, a few of them throwing their javelins, not the entire unit, but they are going after the Granadine Rangers. Once again, the attackers trying to get around the organised defensive line. Mountaineer at Coast should have the beating, honestly, of... And that was not a bad shot at all, grilling several of those Troll Slayers. They're just as deadly in melee, after all, as at range, so definitely a worthwhile target to try and snipe out. Yeah, and the defenders need to do something here, because if the attackers send forward more reinforcements now to help solidify the Mountain Uruk host and what they're doing, the attackers could be onto a winner here. Conversely, however, the Mountain Uruk host could be biting off more than they can chew, and they are going to get into the Arthedain marksman here, but you can see the Mountain Uruk host are wavering because they don't have any support. They're behind enemy lines. And there's also cavalry running around, and yeah, they end up breaking in the end. But can they take advantage of the chaos they're causing? Mithlond's swordmasters being sent forward with dismounted Arthedain knights, so those heavy swordsmen starting to become more of a factor. They could actually salvage this front line here, the defenders, as a result of the attackers not having their reinforcements close enough. Like all of these units, they should be getting pushed forward sooner. The attacks have done decently up to now, but that was a bit of a misplay. I think they should have been ready to capitalise on that, ready to move forward. I know that the rangers are in place, so it can be dangerous, but for me, it was a risk worth taking. And these, I think, are the Crdolan Dunland rangers. Indeed they are, so 3 units of rangers on the defence. They should have all the tools they need to win this fight with that. But again, they're firing up into the air mainly, which is a bit of a waste. You need to get closer to the edge to be making full use of that. Meanwhile, over on this side, we have Crdolan continuing to hold the line, but they're being pushed backwards. You can see that this secondary line, made up of the gatekeepers and other pikemen, is being reached now, so ground is being made, but it's costing the attackers quite dearly. Uruk-hai infantry, you can see there's a few Dunland captains left remaining, 19 of them. How much longer will they last, I wonder? Looks like the raiders are routing by the looks of things. Yep, although they're fighting to the death, so at least they'll stick around. Give the illusion of helping. Uruk-hai infantry, that's not Uruk-hai infantry. What's going on here? Minhiriath spears. Men-at-arms, the Hearthguard are on the way over here as well, so Crdolan perhaps hoping that they can indefinitely hold on to this front line. Ooh. Not entirely sure what's going on there. The catapult crew firing right into the cliffside. Dunland spearmen leaving, which I think is a bit of a mistake. Dunland are still going to need the assistance. I mean, perhaps he's just seeing them routing. The trolls are moving forward, so now once again they're going to try and charge in, try and make the gap. They'll do actually reasonably well against the Knights of Annúminas in melee, but they'll do horribly against the Dunland Troll Slayers in melee. As I keep saying, the clue's in the name. They are going to do very, very nicely against cave trolls, especially as cave trolls do worse than most other trolls in sustained combat. Their tight formation means they can bust through lines nicely, but they don't have the oomph behind them that we saw the snow trolls have earlier on that Lindon front line. And yeah, these troll slayers demolishing the cave trolls. Cave trolls did cause another gap to appear. Arthedain marksmen are having to plug it, and they're having to plug it against blackback berserkers and black uruks, which they will really not enjoy facing in melee. Some heavy swordsmen from Arthedain on the front line as well, dismounted Arthedain knights, but again they're just being overwhelmed here by the foul goblins and uruks from the mountains. In fact, I think this is entirely uruks at this point. The black uruks, I mean the blackback berserkers are probably not goblins. I guess they could be. And also Uruk-hai infantry, so Isengard seeing a bit of an opportunity to move forward here as well with some of their heavier infantry. The Grey Company firing in, that's a nice shot to have, because a lot of it is made up of black uruks and blackbacks. No shields. An excellent target. I'm surprised there's still trolls alive, to be honest with you, given the amount of damaging units that are in here. That is a devastating charge on the Uruk-hai infantry from the Knights of Annúminas, well threaded there by Hidden. Oof, and they're wavering already. Need to push forward with more. They're making the decision to be aggressive here, but they're in danger of it not quite being aggressive enough. There's some black uruks back here as well. The Grey Company out of ammunition, but they still have rangers on foot firing in, which is what I mean. You need to get in and around this defence more quickly, otherwise these rangers are going to rack up a very impressive body count. Here are more Uruk-hai infantry, which is good to see. Snaga skirmishers getting into position with those javelins, firing at something. I think they are going after the Grey Company. Mithlond pikemen might be a better target. Now the Grey Company are out of ammunition, they represent far less of a threat. They are charging in, trying to do some damage here in melee. Ettenmore's troll hunters getting into a position to try and use their javelins from the low ground. I'm surprised these Uruk-hai infantry haven't broken, actually. Despite getting clattered by cavalry and being engaged by Mithlond swordmasters, they are holding their ground. Shows their stoutness in comparison to some of the other units on display. Oof. That Arthedain catapult. Arthedain showing their tools now. Routing spears. Another unit of Dunland spearmen moving forward, only 85 of them, but again, just more units on the front line is important here. They need to keep this assault going. They're in danger though, the attackers, of not really having much to show for this aggression, because now the Uruk-hai infantry do eventually rout. Incredible pressure they were under. And the front line could shift to being back here again. Which you'd have to say would be a failure on the attackers' part. And a good judgment of resources there from the defenders, using javelins, rangers, catapults to salvage that situation. Meanwhile, once again over here you're seeing the lack of quality proving to be a problem for Dunland. This front line has been unmoving so far. Crdolan doing a good job of holding on. Blackwall's on the way forward. They could catch these Minhiriath men-at-arms out of position as the artillery shots streak through the sky in the background there. Again, it's always a little bit worrying when you're seeing most of your melee force comprised of skirmishers that are out of ammunition. And Crdolan once again in the ascendancy against Dunland over here. Dunland, to be fair, I think a little bit more assistance from their allies has been needed over here. Just because of the type of faction Dunland is, you need a little bit of quality. Isengard have provided that, to be fair. Maybe a little bit more from Rhudaur. They had some Dunland spearmen over, but then made them leave again. Blackwall's in and amongst things. The armour piercing from the sharpshooters in melee, not going to be very useful against them. And in turn, those big axes will be brilliant against the Minhiriath units, but there are arrows coming forth from the Wardens of the North. Again, the armour piercing won't be too useful, but the base damage against something along the lines of the Blackwalls will be. But again, they're firing their arrows up into the air, so while they will do some damage, it won't be perhaps as devastating as they would have hoped. I don't know what's going on here. This, I think, would have been the Isengard ballista causing some damage. However, yeah, it is. I mean, they're trying to do damage again. Very nice amount of damage there against the 4 Lindon archers and marines. Questionable whether they're the target you want to be going after, but still, at least they're hitting things and doing damage. See over here as well, some troll slayers in position. And yeah, the defenders, they have managed to reclaim this choke point, and the attackers will need to go again. They'll need to try and smash through this defensive position once more. Easier said than done when you're starting to lose ammunition, and so much of this line is going to be made up of pikes. Arthedain and Lindon, I'm not entirely sure what these Crdolan nobles are doing on the front line. This is the worst possible way that you could use cavalry, trying to make them lead the charge through a pike line in a narrow choke point. Those wicked looking morning stars that the Crdolan nobles have are armour piercing, but cold comfort that will be as they find themselves getting shunted into a fight with pikes. Uruk-hai infantry, Ettenmore's Trollhunts and Snaga taking the brunt there of another catapult volley. There are Witchwoman slavers on the front line as well, which is why I'm surprised the attackers are not being a little bit more proactive in terms of getting more reinforcements onto this front line now. Rhudaur clansmen on the way across again. More Rhudaur units that I think were going to be committed to help Dunland, which are now being turned back to try and help push them through against Arthedain and Lindon. Meanwhile, Riders of Orthanc using their crossbows now, so now Dunland committing forward their scarier units. They've also got the half-orcs on the front line, which are a little bit more resilient than the kind of units they've been sending forward up to now, so they'll be able to hold on and fight for this front line for longer, which is good. Excuse me. Hopefully my voice manages to hold up for the rest of this fight. This is what happens when you record several in a row. It starts to get a little bit more ropey. Riders of Orthanc though, they do a lot of damage. Don't know what they're targeting. The Gatekeepers wouldn't be a bad choice. Still a little bit of support from Isengard as well. In fact, Isengard have got one of their own units of half-orcs on the front line, the Baneguard, doing a little bit of armour-piercing damage here against a largely Minhiriath-based front line. Yeah, there goes the Rhudaur general. Unsurprising, he was right in there, on horseback, in and amongst the Arthedain pike line. So it was always likely to be his tomb. Arthedain now sending their own cavalry in there. There's a steady stream of javelins, so they want to be a little bit careful. Wardens of Elos, Tyrion, I think getting targeted by the ballista considering the amount of crispy corpses there are there. How much ammunition does that ballista still have left? Probably not that much. Back come the Crdolan nobles now. The Wardens of Elos, Tyrion looks to be out of ammo anyway, which is a sign that Rhudaur can send forward their own pikemen. And a fine unit of pikes the Crdolan pikemen are as well. They'll be able to shore things up a little bit more. They won't be just grinding up against this front line hoping to slowly wear them down anymore. They'll actually be anchoring themselves a little bit more. I think the enslavers were probably committed a little bit soon, to be honest with you, but Rhudaur are taking the lead over here. And the armour piercing will be useful against any Arthedain units they come up against. The Mithlond Swordmasters and Wardens of Elos Tyrion, however, will be better placed to deal with that kind of unit. Still plenty more where that came from as well. There's more reinforcements available over here. Ooh. And there you can see once again another volley from the catapult. A little bit unfortunate there actually, because they got primarily friendly fire from that volley. The catapult so far has been very, very useful, but can't really be afford. Well, the defenders can't really afford for that kind of misplaced shot from their artillery. That's nothing to do with the player though. You throw yourself in the arms of the gods of RNG when you use artillery that close to your own lines. Still, the Riders of Orthanc continue to shoot their bolts. And it's a very even fight over here now, which again is a bad sign for the defenders. If you're trading evenly with attackers that vastly outnumber you, it's never a good sign. Dunland, of course, being a somewhat unfinished faction, have still got some Silver Surfers in their ranks. Uruk-hai infantry as well, that one depleted unit finally being committed forward as well, just to try and keep this assault going for as long as possible, but against those large kite shields of the Hearthguard. Once again, Crdolan will be able to hold on. Greenway garrison footmen being siphoned off. Ooh, more shots, that one hits the cliffside. Tagging a unit of Snaga, I mean that's better than nothing, but you would have hoped for more. Meanwhile, putting a real dent in the side of the front line of the Attenmore's Troll Hunters. That's a little bit more like it, sent a mass of the Snaga. But yeah, these Attenmore's Troll Hunters have taken quite a bit of damage themselves, to be fair, but they've been slowly but surely plugging away at the side of this line, and once again wearing the defenders down. Eventually, if it comes down to whose manpower is going to run down first, if that's the way you're going to approach it, then the attackers will win 9 times out of 10, especially with the compositions being what they are. Harland infantry on the front line. The Numinous Gate Guards moving off, so I think at this stage the defenders are thinking about reorganising themselves. Possibly. I mean, they have to make a choice here. Either they're going to pull back, or they're going to defend the 2 choke points that we've seen the vast majority of this battle take place in indefinitely. Now, I would say that it really kind of depends. If you've been paying attention in the game, you would have to pay attention to how much ammunition the attackers still have left. Because if they have more ammunition, and you're trying to still defend these rather exposed positions, that would be a bad call, I think. But it looks as though they're actually going to pull back, or at least they're going to slightly reorganise or shift their priorities a bit. Crdolan pikemen again doing a really good job on the front line. Their shields mean they're going to be slightly less vulnerable to the arrows that are coming their way as well. It's still not an ideal situation for them, but they will do better than most because of that. A really nice little bonus that they have. Dunman Outrunners getting ready to try and move forward as well. Riders of Orthanc, Spears of Orthanc, more crossbow bolts being utilised. Warns of the North looking like they're out of ammo. Don't know what Hearthguard are doing. Trying to pull back by the looks of things. Still Knights of Illuminus back here. Riders of Orthanc are fighting something. I mean, oh right, so I see. The Hearthguard tried to push their way through to get to the mounted unit. In melee, they bear a lot in common actually with the Crdolan nobles, only they actually have the armour to back it up and actually be that armour-piercing melee cav powerhouse. They don't have the devastating charge, of course, but I mean that's a questionable idea because they were always going to get overwhelmed if they tried to do that, and with Rhudaur swordsmen over here, ready to jump on them. Numbers are the one thing that they have in abundance. And of course against spears. Now they're going to fully get onto the front line, although just in time to be fair, because that unit of half-orc spear guard is giving up. They are routing and broken. Luminous Gate Guard's getting ready to move on, so yeah, they're really putting a lot of emphasis onto defending this line, which I think is slightly suspect, to be honest with you, given the fact that still you're going to be facing down some of the nastier crossbow bolts in the game. And over here, given the fact that those Knights of Illuminus were siphoned off, they still have Dunland Rangers, I suppose. They'll be hoping that they can do the business. 5 Troll Slayers. You can see now as well, this is the first time I've actually seen Urukai pikemen get towards the front line. They're going to be met with a hail of ranger shot. So I see there some Dunman outrunners going to try and get through the lines. Don't know how successful they're necessarily going to be, but they're going to cause a bit of disruption if nothing else. A very fragile unit of cavalry overall, however, and the Grey Company is there waiting to meet them with swords drawn. Dismounted Knights of Illuminus picking up the slack on the front line. Still some Crdolan pikes in there, but Isengard pikes as well, so certainly not lacking for that, and I do wonder if the defenders have got enough ammunition left. Down there, Crdolan Rangers, depleted though they may be, firing right down the line here of some Dunland Troll Slayers, a very good target because they can be so devastating, as I've said. Doesn't matter whether you're dealing with them in melee or at range. You want to get rid of them. Especially if Isengard are going to be the ones trying to carry you to victory with their pikes. The Troll Slayers getting into the back of them would be really quite devastating. Still though, this front line has been unmoving. Crdolan continuing to hold on, and given the kind of units that are over here for the attackers, they're going to be entirely reliant really on those Spears of Orthanc doing the business, and I'm not sure whether they're going to have the support to do so, because it's really just this one unit of Rhudaur swordsmen left, and they will rout soon enough. So victory over here. This is, however, I'll sort of go through this again on the post screen, but this is why I'm not a big fan of this map. Because time and time again we've seen these 2 choke points be everything this battle is and nothing else, which considering the size of this settlement, you'd really hope to see more from it, but based on how it's designed, based on how players want to play again, it's a map that attracts creatures of habit, like I said. And it sort of falls into the same category for me as Bersergath now, where we've seen all that it has to offer, really. As good as this battle has been more enjoyable than most I think I've seen on MIRLOND. I've seen this map like 3 times previously. It's worked out in this style each time. This has probably been the most enjoyable one thus far because of the ebbs and flows in the battle, but ultimately I think this will probably be the last time I want to show MIRLOND, to be honest with you, because if players aren't prepared to play differently on it, there's no point in showing it again. We have seen all that it has. Noldorin Guard and Blade Masters on the front line, I think. Actually, no, just Noldorin Guard, so that's the General's unit, isn't it? These Drake Broodlings just forcing their way through. They rout, of course, which I can see what he was trying to do there. He was trying to go around, I think, and oh, the catapult's falling off the cliff. He was going to try and go around, I think, and give some support to Dunland. Certainly not the worst idea in the world, but he ended up routing because of the heat that was coming his way. Noldorin Guard picking up the slack. I'm not entirely sure why the dismounted Knights of Illuminus were fallen back, to be honest with you. Their presence is still required on the front line if they are to be successful. Troll Slayers reloading. The Bulg's Champions do get through the lines, however, and they're made of slightly sterner stuff than the Drake Broodlings in terms of morale. So they're going to go right on through. We'll get back to them in just a second. However, you can also see that the Trolls of the White Hand are moving in, disrupting the Illuminous Gate Guards. I think the attackers now are throwing the kitchen sink at this and thinking, right, okay, we're going to just throw everything in and see if we can't deal with this. The catapult is going to be stopped. I don't know how much ammunition it necessarily has left. I think it's already accomplished what it wanted to do. So, yeah, Bulg's Champions, they're here. They're going to remount the catapult. can disrupt it, certainly. Dunland Rangers are still here with their bows out. I mean, the Rangers might even be a better target to charge into, to be honest, but the defenders will win over here. Dunland have got nothing left to give other than their Spears of Orthanc and possibly their Riders, but I don't know quite where they went. They're going to continue to shoot their crossbow bolts in there, but yeah, ultimately the defenders victorious in the other choke point. So this means, will the attackers focusing more of their resources, notably more of their resources on this side, pay dividends? It's more exposed, so I can see why they did it this way, but ultimately they need to achieve victory for this to be proven the right course of action. Uruk-hai Berserkers going toe-to-toe with the Troll Slayers, a bit of support coming in. I was going to say, the Troll Slayers probably have the edge here, because their defensive stats outside of the hit points are substantially higher. The Berserkers have got a third hit point, of course, but their other defensive values are very low. I'm not sure what the Mounted Knights of Anubis are doing in here. The Berserkers will cleave through those horses like they weren't even there. The Trolls of the White Hand, of course, are being felled now because there are elite units in here. Guards of Orthanc. Black Wolds. Still some good units here. Depleted Uruk-hai infantry just throwing everything forward. The dismounted Knights of Anubis are going to have to earn their pay today. Are those Reforged Javelins? Nope. They're Rhudaur clansmen. Crdolan Berserkers. Axe throwers coming in. I think this may very well come down to the attackers having a few more resources at range to use for the late game. Meanwhile, again, the Mounted Knights of Anubis trying to deal with the Berserkers, who are behind enemy lines now, and they are going to get an envelopment here on the front line against the Arthedain forces. Those elves are just sort of stood there watching, and they need to get in here at this point, because there's really nowhere they can pull back to, I don't think, at this point. They've got some units in reserve, I think, the elves. Yeah, more Noldorin Guard, and Noldorin Blade Masters, and Mithlond Pikemen. Like, now's the time. You're going to need to send them forward. Like, you've already made your decision, really, whether you know it or not as the defenders, to hold on to the same lines continuously. Like, it's too late at this point, I think, to pull back and have a final stand. You need to just commit everything and try and hold. Arthedain are doing so, and now Lindon needs to do the same. Of course, there is still the small matter of Crdolan, who were victorious on their side. Rhudaur Axemen coming forward, so the Spears of Orthanc are now being used to hold the line. They used up most of their ammo anyway, I think. They've got some Trollshaw Axe throwers coming forward from the source, and he's also going to send across another unit of Rhudaur swordsmen as well. I like this. The defenders know as well they need to get their reinforcements over to the other side, so they're just sort of keeping a few units over here so they have enough so that the attackers can pull the old switcheroo on them. But you can see a lot of what Crdolan had that was victorious, as depleted as it may be, is going to be needed on the other side. Meanwhile, those look like wargs to me. Bolg's champions doing the same as the Berserkers, making a nuisance of themselves in the backfield, getting a nice charge there into the rear. Arthedain Troll Slayers. Defeat seems certain. Yeah, they need the elves on the front line. Arthedain are really being sold down the river by the elves a little bit here, and this is, again, what I've told time and time again to be a real pet peeve of mine, when a player keeps elite units back here, because I can only assume it's because they want to be the late game hero with their elite units. It happens time and time again. It's never a good idea, and you always end up looking like a mug for doing it. And that may be the difference here, because having all of those Noldorin on the front line would have made a real difference. They're committing forward a unit of Noldorin Guard now, but they need more than that. They need more. Crdolan are on the way with battered and bruised regiments. If they put on a united front here, I think actually the defenders would be winning this battle, because while they do have some reinforcements to commit the attacks, it's not much. It really isn't much. They've got some enslavers still to commit and some berserkers, but these are the kind of units that are not going to do too well against two Noldorin Blade Masters, in conjunction with those Arthedain pikes, which have now been run over because they didn't have that support. The Bolg's champions, I think, are also fighting the Lindon scouts, which there's only 6 of them left, but you can see the Lindon scouts dying in droves. There goes the Arthedain general at the hands of the Black Wolds, who have pushed their way into the back lines in much the same way as the Uruk-hai Berserkers did. And here they are, what's left of the Dunedain, being mopped up now over here. You can see now the Noldorin are on the way. Again, they could still win with that kind of quality. 2 units of Blade Masters and another unit of Noldorin Guards, some pikes to back them up as well. That's a winning combination if ever I saw one. But I kind of hope they don't, because it rewards the kind of behaviour which I've said time and time again is counterproductive to victory under normal circumstances. Spears of Orthanc and Rhudaur Swordsmen, I mean, there's decent units. I mean, with those Spears of Orthanc in the shape they're in, they should actually win over here now, the attackers. It'll be slow, but it could be a footnote really in this battle, depending on what happens over here, but those Spears of Orthanc may be necessary as the battle continues. Noldorin Blade Masters on the front line now. They'll of course be fairly dominant in most fights as long as they have the support around them, but like I said, with Arthedain's units gone, it may be that the elves don't have the numbers to withstand this attack. And there you can see the axe throwers going after the right targets, ripping their way through some of those MIRLOND pikemen. I think their Crdolan berserkers doing that as well. That was the only volley they had left, and they will commit themselves to melee a strong unit as well. Now then. Now we shall see what Lindon can do. A few Crdolan units over here as well. I mean, they could very well win actually over here now, the defenders. The quality of those Noldorin may be enough. Defeat seems certain. Guards of Orthanc are there. There's not... I mean, the Black Walls will start to fall away, of course. Any blows they can land would be highly appreciated, I'm sure, by the attackers. The fact they've still got pikes as well, Lindon, is significant. There's a Dunedain Trollslayer in the backfield there, and a Knight of Anuminas. Reforged Javelins are here. They have revealed themselves. Another high-tier unit, probably with ammunition left, and that could be a match-winning revelation, that one. Need to get some more units on the front right now, I think, some more high quality stuff. Crdolan Berserkers would do. They'd still lose fairly handily to Noldorin Blade Masters, but they put up a better fight. These Spears of Orthanc still have a bit of ammo left as well, so the Rhudaur Swordsmen will get in there in melee. The Spears of Orthanc will shoot. I think this kind of range support the attackers still have left will probably be the difference here. If it came down to just a pure slog in melee, those Noldorin could be enough, with the fact the attackers still have more missiles to utilise. I think that's ultimately going to be game, set and match. I could be wrong. I mean, if the attackers' morale starts to collapse in terms of their units on the front, which is why they need to get some more elite units on here, then that momentum could carry the defenders to a victory. Yeah, Crdolan Berserkers need to be moved in. It will keep the front line solid enough. Oof. Javelins being used, tearing their way through that unit of Greenway Garrison footmen and routing them. Not sure that's entirely the best target. You should perhaps position your Reforged Javelins to where they can start pounding on the Noldorin Blade Masters as soon as they're able. Let's see. Witch Realm Enslavers as well, 49 of them remaining. Again, it's really... the amount of elite units they have left would suggest the attackers should certainly win this, but it's the kind of elite units they have left where the Blade Masters will do quite well against all of them. I just don't think the Blade Masters are here in high enough quantities. There is the Dunland General. There's some Warns of the North preventing the Spears of Orthanc from winning, and the announcer seems to think the attackers have got it in the bag. Lindon is still fighting. Arthedain look like they've routed completely, which, considering the loss of their general, is not that surprising. I didn't see it at mid-defeat. Maybe it popped up and left just as quickly, but yeah, victory seems certain. There's a bit of wavering going on the front line from Lindon. A real rarity. 4 Lindon archers trying to shoot into the flank. Only 30 of them, but they could make a difference. They'll definitely do some good damage to elements of the army that are Rhudaur. They don't have quite the same sturdiness as their Isengard comrades. There goes, I think that was probably a Rhudaur general. I don't think it was Isengard. Well, it could have been Isengard actually, it was Guards of Orthanc. So yeah, Isengard shaken all of a sudden. Reinforcements in there, however, Reforged Javelins with those big spiky war clubs. There goes the Crdolan general, which will probably be the end of Crdolan, to be honest. They don't have that much left anyway. And they are more vulnerable to morale shocks than the other 2 defenders, and Arthedain have already gone due to similar reasons, of course. So it will come down to Lindon. Can their quality see them over the line? I would say probably not at this point, because they're going to have to deal with an attack coming from the other direction at some point as well. Swordsmen and crossbows in melee. Spears of Orthanc as well. It's gonna be too much of a workload for them to deal with all on their lonesome. 34 Lindon archers won't hold them back for long. We've got going on over here. Goblin King's bodyguard as well. 27 of them. They're going to push their way through. Probably need to do something about surrounding these Noldorin Blade Masters, because they've probably racked up a very impressive kill count for themselves. Exactly the kind of unit you need, but just not in the quantities that will make victory possible. Like I said, it's the sort of thing which there's a lot of things in this battle, I think, which have led to this situation. The attackers have just worn the defenders down, and attrition is something that you can get the defenders with so often in a battle like this. Like I said, I think it really could have been different if the defenders had elected to not play this map. Like last time, to be fair, we did see the defenders try to retreat to this little area over here. Didn't work out. I think if they had elected to retreat a little bit sooner, the defenders, try and utilise areas like this to skirmish with the attackers as they move through this section of the settlement, it could have been very different. But in the end they elected not to, and stubbornness, I think, has cost the defenders here. They've stubbornly tried to hold on to the same choke points for too long, because they perceived them as being the best on the map. They're narrow, right? They're also exposed. And I think the use of the attacker skirmishers, especially in the last third of the battle, has been vital. And I think that will ultimately be what ends up being the difference. Goblin King's bodyguard, if the defenders do somehow pull this out of the bag, it'll be because of the quality of an individual unit, not so much because of the play. But even then, I don't think the Noldorin Blade Masters will be enough. Goblin King's bodyguard do get us around. They will be thrown off, but again, it'll just do a little bit more damage. Troll Show Axe Throws. They should probably get those Reforged Javelins into a position where they can use the Javelins on the Noldorin Blade Masters, because as soon as that's the case, the game is well and truly done. Here we can see this is this is why you know it's over with. If this force wasn't here, it could still potentially, if the Reforged Javelins were misused, then the defenders could dig themselves out. But with more reinforcements arriving from over on the other side, where Crdolan, they won, but then they had to send their reinforcements over here, which allowed the attackers to come back and win that side. They're going to come over here. I don't know if the crossbows still have ammunition, do they? They've still got their crossbows drawn, so perhaps they do. Rhudaur swordsmen as well, 66 of them. Their reward for a job well done is going to be a melee fight against Noldorin Blade Masters, I think. No justice in the world, eh? Still some Noldorin Guard are there, 42 of them. They will move to intercept the reinforcements, and they will do a few crossbow bolts coming in from the spears and the Uruk-hai crossbowmen. Rhudaur swordsmen really struggle against those Noldorin Guard, but you can see over here, this front line. In fact, if it wasn't for those reinforcements coming from the other side, they could very well have won this. I mean, I still think with the Reforged Javelins, you would imagine, you know, all it's going to take is one good volley. Again, like them misjudged targets, I think, from Source with the Reforged Javelins. They do finally get a shot off now, and another shot, fast firing the Reforged Javelins, and that should be enough now. But it would, I mean, it's very close, this. The margins by which this battle have been won and lost have been very, very narrow, and I think both the attackers and the defenders could have improved certain things. But I do think the attackers are good value for their money. Here, or good value for the win, I should say. It's not as if they're getting paid for this. But, yeah, I think they deserve it, overall. I think the early aggression in particular showed their intent right from the off. And ultimately the attrition, they were initially aggressive, then they slowed things down and skirmished, then they put their foot on the pedal again, made a couple of mistakes actually there, because the defenders did manage to throw off the times they tried to push around. The idea was right, the execution just wasn't quite there from the attackers at that point. Ultimately, however, they were able to recover from that. Again, use what skirmishes they had left when the defenders had run their supply dry. There's a case for saying the defenders used up too much of their ammunition to salvage the situation over here. And there we go. 4% the difference. A good battle this, but like I said, probably won't be seeing MIRLOND for a good long while after this, because the proof is in the pudding, and this map tends to work out, despite it being quite grand and sweeping, it has worked out in exactly the same way every single time I've seen it. This, however, was the best of the bunch, so quit while you're ahead, I say. And this is probably the best demonstration of MIRLOND you're likely to see. Unless someone gives me the guarantee that the map isn't just going to play out in exactly the same way again, this will probably be the last we see of this map, because it is like Bersergath, only at least with Bersergath it does tend to have some variation. Maybe more of a Poundland Bersergath, as it were. But still, a good battle to sign off on for this map, I think. So big thank you to Misty for sending it to me, and a big thanks to all of the players for being a part of it. Kill counts, similar across the board. You can see who had to sort of take it on the chin. Smelly Ogre, he was much more of the cannon fodder, essentially, but someone has to do it. It's not a glamorous job, but like I say, someone often has to do it for the attackers, and on this occasion it was him. I think the Misty Mountains player deserves quite a lot of credit for how aggressive he was willing to be, especially seeing as I've never seen him play the game before. Newer names like this often tend to be very conservative and not aggressive at all, and even when they are aggressive it tends to be very clumsy. Wasn't the case with him, actually. I think his aggression was good. I think that Dunland, they got the most kills. I think that was because they were mostly facing off against Crdolan with a little bit of support from Isengard, and then later some from Rhudaur as well. Their crossbows probably did quite a lot of that, but we'll see that in just a moment. The defenders, splitting the load between them. Again, I think Lindon should have committed those Nolder in slightly earlier. It would have been easier on them if they had a bit of Arthedain support. Could have been enough to turn the battle around as well. It wasn't a huge margin by which the attackers were able to win this one. See what did the damage for Dunland though. Spears of Orthanc getting over 100 kills. Trollshaw Exros getting over 100 kills. You'll often see this with Dunland because the vast majority of their infantry is quite weak, so their high damage projectiles tend to get more done. Riders of Orthanc as well. The Black Wolves are really the exception. They're the exceptional unit of damage dealing infantry, pure infantry, that Dunland have, a unit they share with Rhudaur, of course. Yeah, about what you would expect. The Black Wolves and then all of their crossbows and axe throwers doing the business for Dunland. But yes, that was MIRLOND once again. Big thank you to Misty and all the players once again. There is a few, like I did this one because it's been sat in my to-do list basically since October, because I did MIRLOND and then I think 3 or 4 days afterwards I got sent this one, so obviously there had to be a bit of a gap. But I've gone back to it now, so this is like the oldest replay that I've still got left. I still had left to do. And there's a few more as well, like Crdolan Outpost is in a similar boat, so that one will probably come out in the next couple of weeks or so as well. That one was sent to me by Lango, I believe. So don't worry, that one will be coming out fairly soon. Probably not right after this one. The Arthedain Outpost is another one of those, which again has been sent, which I did closer to when it came out, so that one will be coming soon. There's Umbar is another one. So again, I've been sent basically a few replays where I did them and then I got sent another one a couple of days afterwards. So Arthedain Outpost, Crdolan Outpost, Umbar, that sort of thing. So you'll be seeing them in the next few weeks, I would say, pop up again. An Eclipse scenario, another one, is coming out soon as well. And then a field battle as well, which I think is taking place on the dreaded grassy plain. That might be the next one, depending, because those tend to take a little bit less time to record. So if I just have a little bit of time to record just the one smaller battle, that might be the next one that comes out. But we'll see. Streams, of course, hopefully by this point have stabilised themselves again. We'll keep doing them as well. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.